Hello and welcome to the Solar Insiders podcast, the very first episode of the year, but without its regular host. Sophie Vorath is still away on holidays, so you have me, Charles Parkinson, the editor-in-chief of Renew Economy, and our lead reporter, Rachel Williamson. Rachel, welcome back from holidays.
Thank you. You too.
And welcome to 2026.
Yes.
Is it safe out there?
Well, are you talking specifically right now, or are you talking generally this year? Because who knows what's going to happen this year?
Who knows what's going to happen this year? Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
bizarre.
Yes. Look, I think we'll drop the global geopolitics very quickly because that could be dangerous. We're going to keep to our brief, which is solar and battery storage and all things sort of home electrification, if you like, and even a bit of mobility. We do. Sophie isn't here with us today, but she has left us a very good interview with the managing director of the UK-based Kaluza, which is kind of turning the energy industry upside down and inside out with its new software, but mostly with a really interesting approach to the retail business of energy. And it's fun to think that Australia probably leads in the rollout of rooftop solar and home batteries, but we're kind of a bit behind in the evolution of the energy retail, if you like. And yes, there's not that many people who have a lot of faith in it, and that's one of the things that Kaluza tried to address. So, yeah. Rachel, I think we might come back with the news of the week, because we've got a bit of that to talk about.
That we do.
Data for the year, the month of December, finally. A solar recycling pilot that might have some grip, none too soon. But look, let's hear first from the interview that Sophie conducted just before Christmas with Melissa Gander. She's the Chief Executive Managing Director of Kaluza.
Melissa Gander, welcome to Solar Insiders.
Thank you, Sophie. It's great to be here.
We tried to catch up at the craziness that is All Energy Australia, but we didn't manage it. So now you're joining me from all the way across the other side of the world, in London, I presume.
Just a bit further north, so just south of Birmingham.
Oh, okay. Well, from in the UK, let's say, and yes, I'm all the way on the other side in Melbourne. So. But it's wonderful to have you here, and really a great privilege, because you're one of these people who has a pretty impressive career. When I start digging deep, like, how have you fit this all into your life? But before I carry on too much about that, I thought I would ask you, what brings you to this point in your energy journey? How did you get here, Melissa?
So my energy journey started nearly 20 years ago now. So I initially started my career as a data analyst, and then worked within an energy network. So it's an independent network installing gas and electricity connections in the UK, and that's where I started my energy journey. So I spent a couple of years within the networks business, in various different roles, and then moved across into energy retail in 2009. So having spent some time in the world of networks, yes, looked across to energy retail and thought that looked slightly more fast-paced and exciting. So I moved across and joined OVO Energy when it was a startup in the UK.
Right at the beginning. So
right at the beginning. So we were setting up an energy company in a barn in the Cotswolds, a very beautiful part of the UK, and so we launched. So we started out at a time when the UK market was really ready for some disruption. There were the large, as we called them then, the big six players within the market. Customer trust was low, engagement was low, and so we started out
sounding familiar.
Energy company that wanted to make a difference. So our initial aims were to become the most trusted energy company in the UK, to reach 1 million customers, and also to be able to be a great employer. So a fantastic place to work. So they were our initial aims when we set up OVO, and we achieved them. So they were a 10-year aim, and we got there in just under that amount of time. Organically grew to 1 million customers, received many customer service awards along the way, and also became the top UK employer. So it was a fascinating journey. And at that point, we looked to what would come next for OVO. And at that point, it was clear that we're going to be entering a different phase for energy. So the early signs of the energy transition had started in the UK with the adoption of EVs. We're also starting to see some of the early volatility. And so we looked at the next phase of OVO's growth. Actually acquired a large incumbent business in the UK, and so took that on, which moved OVO from 1 million customers to nearly 4 million overnight.
Wow.
From 2,000 employees to almost 10,000. So a significant change for the business. And as well as looking at bringing scale to really be able to have the operating leverage within the market, we then looked at the technology we thought the business would need for its next phase of growth.
And at that stage, I was going to say, at that stage, Kaluza was your operating platform.
So Kaluza has an interesting history. So it was actually back in 2018 that OVO started to embark on what became the world's largest vehicle-to-grid trial in the residential space. So we connected over 300 EVs to a solution that we previously acquired back in 2017. So that was a platform that was a demand response solution, and was at that point orchestrating heating load. And we saw the opportunity with the emergence of EVs in the UK market to use that and develop it to be able to support optimization of electric vehicles. So we had the software solution. We worked closely with a small business that was designing and manufacturing V2G units. We then went through the process of selecting customers, installing the units within their homes. So many challenges along the way. The initial unit was too heavy for a single person to lift, so it would require two people to lift it, which obviously the economics of that starts to become quite challenging. So we then needed to redesign a unit to get under 25 kilograms. We encountered a change in the UK wiring regulations along the way, so that required another redesign of the unit. There was then, as I mentioned, the customer selection, the site surveys. We then needed to also work closely with the EV manufacturer to demonstrate that the bidirectional charging wouldn't impact the health of the battery. We had to ensure that they were comfortable waiving any warranty claims. So we managed to overcome all of that.
Which is wonderful to hear, because that is what is going on here now. Like, there'd be people listening to this in Australia going, oh my God, yes, this is what we're doing, only so many years later. So keep going.
The biggest challenge that we face is actually providing the customers with the value on their bill.
Right.
You can, in our existing platform, then offer a dynamic tariff that would then change its rates depending on whether the customer was importing and exporting and the time of day. So at that point, we realised that a new solution was needed. If we think about a lot of the billing solutions out there and the legacy billing solutions, they were built at the point where a customer might submit a reading once a quarter, or there would be someone out going to the customer's home to actually read their meter. The customer would then receive a bill once every 3 months, quite often paid by check. I don't know if that's
or you go to the post office and pay it.
Exactly. And so that's what solutions were designed for. They were designed for customers being billed for energy after the fact, once every 3 months, and making a payment. What became clear to us in our early trials was that a different type of solution was needed. It was clear just the amount of data that we were going to need to be able to not just hold, but to be able to derive value from.
Yes.
And so rather than holding that data outside of our core platform, which a lot of solutions did at that point in time, so whether that be metering data or potentially solar inverter data, we actually built our solution around it. And so what we have created is a real-time solution. So we can connect to devices in customers' homes, whether that's their electric vehicle or electric vehicle charge point, and optimize how and when energy is being used. But most importantly, being able to provide the customer with that value. So seeing that on their bill, plus also being able to engage with their energy usage data in real time. So not needing to wait 3 months to understand how much their energy has cost them, how much they might have exported, and the value that they have derived from that. We're able to provide that to customers in real time.
Yes, and so and on the flip side of that, customers aren't getting this bill shock after 3 months, getting a bill and going, "What on earth?" And not knowing why it's so high, or alternatively why it's cheaper that time. So, yeah, it's opening that communication between the two.
Exactly that. It's we often use the analogy of banking, that the banking industry has been completely transformed over the last 5 to 10 years. So if you go out and buy a coffee, you actually receive a ping on your mobile phone with a receipt before the coffee reaches you. It is all just real time. And then we think about energy, that quite often you know how much you've spent 3 months after the fact. And that's because of
no good tea.
no, and it's because of technology constraints, but it's also consumers' expectations haven't necessarily changed yet when it comes to how they engage with their energy, but we're really starting to see that change in the UK, in Australia, and globally.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so that was the origin of Kaluza, and it's interesting because this could be completely off the topic, and you can feel free to go, I don't know what you're talking about, Sophie. But I did a bit of Googling, so I was like, it's a very interesting name, Kaluza. And I looked into it, and I think it's a Polish word. That's definitely not why you called it that. It's like mud or puddle. But there's a physics theory that it involves an extra dimension or something. And I thought that would be it. That would be it. It's this extra dimension, a new part to the energy spectrum, which am I on track, or have I just completely made something up?
In terms of our name, yes, it's the Kaluza is, as you say, the latter. So Kaluza was a physicist who was looking at how to reconcile two different theories and add in an additional dimension. And if we think about the energy system now, it is definitely becoming multi-dimensional. So it previously has been quite a static system from power station to plug, with a very linear equation when it comes to looking at value, and especially customer lifetime value. So if we think about that as an example, it's quite a set equation. So determining different elements like the cost to serve an individual customer based on how many times they contact in a year, their usage. So that usage can tend to be over a longer period of time, months, years, reflective of the billing periods. Then also elements like debt, so customers' propensity to fall into debt. Yeah, that equation has been pretty standard for many years and can be looked at on an individual customer basis, and can change over the customer's lifetime, but changes relatively infrequently. I think we're entering a very different world now, where that customer lifetime value equation is multidimensional. It is real time. It is based on the weather on a particular day. And actually, individual customers can affect other customers' equations. It's becoming more interdependent. So one customer's behavior and the value that can be derived from that does actually then impact another customer and the value that they can see. We've seen that more than ever in the Australian market. When we think about the high solar penetration within rooftop solar within the Australian market, there was definitely a lot of value that early customers could derive with feed-in tariffs. But then that value equation over the last couple of years has
completely flipped. Yeah.
And that happened really quite quickly. So if you're an energy business, the lifetime value equation for customers, or the value that you'd expect from a solar customer, previously would have been high. Yeah. Then you enter a period of significant negative pricing during the middle of the day. That value equation has flipped, So what might
Mm.
historically have been a high value customer can actually flip quite quickly into a low value customer. And then,
Yeah.
depending on the weather the next day, it changes again.
Yeah.
And so the equations that we need to be working on as an industry now and preparing ourselves for, and making sure that we've got the right data for and the right technology for, they are multi-dimensional. So I think that's when we think about Kaluza and where we got our name from. It was understanding the how the energy system was moving and the different dimensions that we would need to be reconciling going forward.
Yeah. And look, another term I keep coming across when I read about Kaluza and follow its journey is this sort of backbone for the retailer. And that's another really interesting way of looking at it. And I guess on a very sort of basic level, it's really about making the retailers' systems a whole lot more efficient, and therefore not costing the customer as much, I suppose, and not costing you guys as much, and making sure that there's a more seamless experience with the consumer. But I wanted to talk to you because I want to understand why that's so important for the consumer, and why there's another element to this that isn't just about making things work well and come up to date with the technology and the times and the way people use energy, but it's also about trust, isn't it?
It is. I think when we think about the energy system going forward, customers are, to be able to derive value, going to need to place trust in energy companies and the technology that they use to be able to derive additional value. So especially when we think about demand response and flexibility. So it's really key that customers trust the technology and those that are providing it. It's personal. So how a customer wants to heat their home, to what temperature and when, right through to when they want their electric vehicle charged by. It's personal, those decisions. It isn't going to be the same for every individual customer. And so it's about ensuring the customers can add in their personal preferences, but also trust that they are then going to be acted upon.
Yeah. And so, sort of almost shared assets as well, isn't it? Like, you've gone out and purchased this electric vehicle, which wouldn't be cheap. You've bought solar panels and a battery, again, quite a big investment. You want that to be used carefully and well, and to used in a way that's going to optimize it for you.
Definitely. And it's an interesting area. We've spent a lot of time understanding customers' preferences and their behaviours, especially when it comes to electric vehicle charging. So with EV charging, the longer a customer is actually plugging in their vehicle and allowing that optimization, the more value you can derive from it. So the larger the charging window, the more optimization opportunity there is along the way. So it's really key that customers trust the platform and charge their vehicle, and then trust the platform to be able to manage the charging of their vehicle and to provide that flexibility. So there's a couple of solutions that we implemented quite early on to be able to support customers in having confidence in our platform being able to optimize their charging. So the first was a minimum state of charge. So that means that a customer can set a minimum state of charge in our app, and then as soon as they plug their vehicle in, it will charge to that minimum state. So that might be 10-20% of battery or an equivalent amount of miles. What we learned is that's really key for customers, that they want to have the confidence that whether it's picking their children up from school or, for example, what's the distance to the nearest hospital or the distance to maybe an elderly parent's home, they want to have the confidence that there will always be that amount of charge in their EV.
And then we jump in the car.
And then they'll trust us to optimize from there beyond. So that was one feature that we added in. We also added in what we call our charge path feature. So customers can see the expected charging rates and patterns for their charging So that's based on our optimization algorithms. We have we can forecast when the vehicle's likely to charge against many data points, from pricing right through to the weather.
Yep.
And so that means that the customer can actually see when that charging is due to take place. So if they plug their vehicle in at, say, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, when we wouldn't ordinarily choose to charge a vehicle, because that's when prices are higher in the UK, it means that although we might not be charging the vehicle immediately, the customer can see that that is actually planned. And so they can see the forecast of when their charging will start, and so they have the confidence to then allow the charging to be managed on their behalf.
Don't need to wander out later at 9 o'clock and plug it in.
No, or wonder, or worry that actually is it that it's the vehicle's due to be charged at that point of time, or is there a fault with their, for example, their charge point, or is it the software? Have they set their preferences correctly? It provides that peace of mind. We also introduced an override option quite early on as well. So if the customer sees the expected charge and for any reason might want to charge their vehicle immediately, they can override the managed charging. And it's interesting, our proposition in the UK, a customer receives a lower rate for the charging of their vehicle, so we can disaggregate the energy that's used for the customer's home versus what's used to charge their vehicle, and offer them a lower rate for their EV charging in return for the flexibility. But if they choose to override that schedule, then it means that they pay the higher rate, so equivalent to the rate that they would pay for their home. And so it's a choice for a customer. They can make that choice to override the charging algorithm to have that immediate charge. So all of these different features and initiatives have led to a 141% increase in the available hours for Kaluza to be able to optimize charging in the UK. So it's just understanding consumers and their preferences and really personalizing the experience for them. And they do start to trust the solutions that are out there, trust the organizations that are providing them, and then that both the energy business and the consumer derives the value from that.
It's really fascinating, and I mean we should get onto the Australian part of the business very soon, because that's one of the reasons why we're talking to you. But I just find that it's so interesting. It's like a parallel universe that you guys were going through that so long ago, and obviously there's been a lot of trial and error and a lot of learning and data collection and all of those things to get to this point. Because I noticed that it's been hugely successful, because you've got deals with Volvo, BMW, Stellantis, VW in charging. So obviously the manufacturers of the EVs as well are happy with the way this is all working.
Definitely. We currently optimize over 30,000 vehicles in the UK, and we have our similar managed charging pilots live in Japan, the US. I'm sure we'll come onto Australia.
Yeah.
There is but the partnerships that you mentioned are globally applicable too. And so integrating with the EV OEM in one market can mean that there's immediate access to their vehicles in other markets too. And it's really important, as you said, to build those relationships to ensure that there is the right customer experience in place. So making sure that those integrations between our solution and the OEM solution are resilient and well designed, ensuring that the customer experience is seamless and goes back to the trust point as well.
Yeah,
they have to work.
Yeah, and I think alternatively in Australia, it's a funny situation, because I think as you mentioned, what our journey with solar PV, we love to chat about how what a success rooftop solar's been in Australia, and it's been incredible, and we lead the world per capita still for panels installed, and but that was such a journey of grid independence, independence from the grid, and taking control of your power and slashing your bill. And then it was sort of like, and I'm doing you a favor by exporting my excess solar to the grid. And so that was sort of the way it all came about. And then to have had it flipped now where, we've got basically zero tariffs during the middle of the day. There's nothing. The message now is self-consume. Batteries have suddenly become huge because we have the federal rebate, which is just really exceeded everyone's expectations. And that's great. That's a really important piece of the puzzle. But EVs are kind of lagging way behind. And, I think everyone can see how important they're going to be. That there'll be this stage where they're part of the ecosystem and that's it, and no one even really thinks about it. But we're just not quite there. And I wonder sometimes whether that way that we've come our journey makes the trust equation even harder, because it's been so much about independence and these are my assets and my savings and, sort of sticking it to the man kind of thing. I might be imagining that, but it feels like Australia is a bit of a hard enough nut to crack in that department of here, let us take charge of your asset and I promise you it'll be good. Have you found that at all? Or and in this very long preamble to the question, I should mention that Over came here, what was it, in 2019, an offshoot, and then AGL bought Ovo, and then Kaluza came here and AGL's bought a 20% stake in Kaluza. And so there's already millions of customers for you guys here in Australia. But and I'm just wondering, is that your experience here, that it's a bit different?
It's really interesting thinking through what will be the equivalent in the UK, and we saw similar resistance for our smart meter rollout. And customers weren't very engaged, didn't see the value in having a smart meter installed. Others actively were felt that it was somewhat an invasion of their privacy as well, and there was mistrust. But it's really interesting how that's changed over time. If I think about the UK, the last couple of winters, the National Grid has operated a scheme to prevent blackouts by incentivizing consumers to reduce their energy usage at certain times of the day. So customers would be paid for a reduction in their energy usage. The only way to be able to calculate that is through a customer having a smart meter installed.
Yeah.
So I think until customers really see the value for them, it can sometimes be hard to overcome the initial objections and go beyond early adopters. It's interesting in the UK now, we're also seeing that from an EV perspective too. So now 1 in 4 new cars sold are electric vehicles, and it took time to get there. And it's everything from making sure that there's the right charging infrastructure in place, through to energy companies offering EV tariffs as well, and also the installation of charge points at home. So it's interesting when you think about the journey that each market's going on, and it will be different because there's a different starting point. In the UK, for example, heat pumps, they're definitely further behind than other markets that we see within Europe. So I think every market has a similar has a different circumstances, but I think there's still the similar themes of customer trust and also being able to demonstrate to customers the value. And that value, it can be derived on an individual basis, but increasingly it's going to be through the orchestration of a whole system. So collectively more value can be achieved rather than on an individual basis. But that does mean a different relationship with energy providers along the way to be able to build that trust, to be able to for customers to have that visibility of how and when their energy is being used. And so that does require a different type of technology. As we were saying earlier, it's similar to banking, for customers being able to see in real time how their energy is being used, how it's being generated, what that looks like system-wide is going to be really important to be able to bring them on that journey. And new technology solutions are needed to enable that.
Absolutely. So you're working with one of our big three, so not quite big six, but big three, and who I guess the big three cop some frack for being, incumbent and legacy operators, but to their credit, there's been a lot of very rapid innovation going on, and in particular, this kind of thing where they're connecting with companies like Kaluza who are really at the I can't. We've got to find another expression for coalface because it doesn't work anymore, does it? But who are at the leading edge, let's say, of and at the consumer interface, really, because I think sort of for years we sort of heard this talk. Oh yeah, the consumer is really important. The consumer needs to come first, and for years it was a bit sort of, oh yeah, you keep saying that, but now it really is that because it has to be not because it's nice to have and not because wouldn't it be nice if our consumers loved us, but because, as you say, we have to all work together to make this work. So how does Kaluza, like on a day-to-day basis, what are the things that customers will see changing for them that is sort of derived from what you guys have spent all these years fine-tuning?
It's really interesting. So I actually think that maybe my experience is more in the UK rather than Australia, but I do think that energy companies have always been quite consumer focused. It's just that the consumer needs have probably changed and expectations faster than the energy companies have, and so they're still thinking about great customer service being answering the phone within 2 minutes. But now it's so much more than that when we think about the overall customer experience, and the expectations around digital experiences have changed. So I do think that that historically the industry has been quite consumer focused. It's just a change in expectations. From a Kaluza perspective, we've touched on some of the examples around how we're supporting customers that might be early adopters of solutions like solar, like EVs, but there are some customers, and we should touch on other customers that might not have been able to go on that journey. We should definitely touch on those. But so how does our solution not just support those that are early adopters or further along the energy transition journey? So it's being able to provide great levels of service for those customers that haven't yet started that journey. And it's a really interesting space at the moment when we think about how customers are supported and served. And this is where and we haven't touched on AI yet. So it's where it starts to come in to be able to use AI to be able to support customer service agents to be able to sometimes diagnose complex issues and be able to effectively support customers, and for customers to be able to self-serve as well with the confidence of that they are going to be that their issue is well understood and that they are being provided with the right insight, the right advice, and that actually that is then going to be effectively resolved for them. So we still have some of the challenges within the energy sector of there's a dependence across the wider industry for the quality of data coming in. So it can sometimes lead to service challenges and billing challenges. And so ensuring that customers have the trust that even when it comes to getting their bill right, that's going to happen. And if it doesn't, that they have then the support that they need.
That it'll be sorted.
And it's really interesting. We're starting to see some AI use cases when it comes to supporting agents with the identification of vulnerable customers. In the UK, we have the Priority Services Register, where if a customer is dependent on energy, the alert is then sent to the network. to ensure that that customer isn't disconnected, or in a disconnection event, their service is then prioritised. I think there's something similar in Australia with life support.
Life support, yeah.
And so there's various different factors that mean a customer is eligible to be on the priority service register, or there's or life support. And if you're an agent that is on a call to a customer, maybe supporting them with a more complex issue and investigating their account, it can sometimes be hard to detect some of the signs or the indicators that customer might have a vulnerability or a requirement for extra support. And so we're deploying AI in those use cases to be able to be effectively a second pair of ears for the agent, and to be able to detect if the customer is referencing any terms or using any language that might indicate that they have a requirement for that level of support, and then proactively flagging that to an agent to be able to ensure that their customer is enrolled on the right service. So AI, we've many examples of how we're using it to optimize the whole energy system, from right from the kind of EVs through to solar and batteries. But then our technology can be used as well to support customer care agents and support vulnerable customers too.
Yes, as you mentioned, it's really important to keep in mind these customers that are not as engaged in the energy transition as some, because there's a lot of talk about how we have to have people engaged, and this is about being involved and changing your behavior. But there are a lot of people that either can't change their behavior or don't really want to, haven't got the time or energy to, for very many very good reasons. And I think in the energy industry and in the renewables industry, we've all been guilty of not giving this sector of the community enough attention, and finding the solutions to say, okay, well, there will be this sector that needs to be looked after just as well, but without the engagement back.
And this is something that we're passionate about. We mentioned our early vehicle to grid trials. Well, it's really interesting when we were looking at some of the data points. So some customers managed to optimize their charging, so selling back their energy to the grid, and they managed to cover the cost of charging their electric vehicle, so effectively 3 miles. Some customers took it even further and were able to with our technology support, able to optimize their charging and discharging to not just cover the cost of their miles driven, but also to cover the cost of powering their home. So effectively, they negotiated their energy cost. So 0 bills for their home and for their vehicle. And I think what's really important is looking at how we can ensure these types of benefits become available to those that really need them and need them the most. And I think what's really important there is having the data that can then show the value that can be derived, and then using that to underpin some of the costs and the upfront costs that is often required in whether it's acquiring an EV or installing solar. How do we look at the overall value equation for that and minimize the upfront cost with the confidence that customer will see a return over time? And I think that's really important for customers that might be disadvantaged or low income. And so we're currently in California involved in a pilot that is for single direction EV charging and also bidirectional, so V2G. And 50% of the participants in that pilot will come from low income or disadvantaged communities. And actually many live in an area where there's some of the worst air pollution in California. So that's also the US as well.
Wow.
So being able to support those customers with reducing their transportation costs, plus also starting the journey of kind of the first steps to cleaner air within that area is really important. So it's a trial that we're
huge, isn't it? Like that, this is something that people take for granted, and for some people it's just not there. To be able to breathe clean air.
does disproportionately affect for lower income and disadvantaged communities. And so being able to work closely with these communities to be able to offer solutions that reduce their transportation costs, also are the first steps to cleaner air, I think is...
Which will equate to less health problems and etc. and so on. You know, the flow-on benefits are really multi-level. So sounds fascinating. And I mean, you're just in so many interesting markets. Like you're in France as well through Engie, I think. And yeah, it's just I think a really promising to have all of that experience in all of these different markets, as you say, because the different problems that crop up for different environments that, you know, are probably bound to crop up everywhere eventually, just at different times.
They are, and there's the same in all markets that we spend time in. There's just the same themes coming through. So there's everywhere there's the volatility in pricing driven by increase in renewables. That is very apparent within Australia. There's also then consumers adopting more devices, whether that's EVs, whether that's solar, that then need to be optimized to drive value. Every market has regulatory pressures. Sometimes they can be constraints to operate within. Other times it can be a drive for innovation. And then we're also seeing, as you mentioned, consumer expectations change as everything becomes increasingly digitized, as we see the adoption of more advanced solutions like AI. I think all of these themes mean that there's this real drive to move towards new solutions, and we see that in all of the markets that we operate in.
Yeah, and in Australia, you've got sort of ambitions to join forces with other retailers as well. It's not you haven't got an exclusivity agreement with ATL, and you have also invested in a local company called Beige Technologies.
We have. So in Australia, we have a team now of over 100. So yes, we have a strong presence in Melbourne. I often spend time in our Australian office too, and there's a real buzz there around the difference that our solutions can make, and a real excitement in the Australian market. It really is at the forefront of the energy transition. Our learnings in the Australian market are going to be applicable globally. So it's a fantastic place to be. And you mentioned our acquisition of Beige Technologies. So that was earlier this year. And there's a fantastic team that have come with that acquisition, that are really adding value to the Kaluza business with their deep energy expertise, especially within the Australian market. They also have some solutions in the C&I, so commercial industrial space. So a pricing engine that enables more granular pricing proposals to be provided to C&I customers. And I think when we think about energy going forward, what we find is that what we're observing is that historically residential customers and commercial or industrial or business customers have been managed quite separately with very different needs. But they are really starting to converge. When we think about the tariffs that historically C&I customers have had, they have been more complex and more tailored to their specific needs. That's now starting to happen in the residential space too, when we look at time of use tariffs, or even the example in the UK of what we believe is the world's first type of use tariff, where a customer's charged a different amount for how that energy is actually used, so for their EV versus their home. So when we think about the tariff complexity that we've seen in the C&I space, that has previously had more granular time periods that have been measured, that is now moving into the residential space. So there's convergence there. There's convergence in how energy is settled. Sorry, this might get slightly technical.
I know.
In the Australian market, there's 5-minute settlement. In the UK, there's 30-minute settlement that's now live for residential customers. That's been live for commercial and industrial customers for many years. So now we're starting to see the convergence there. And then when we think about flexibility. For many years in the UK, we've had the concept of an interruptible supply within the C&I space. So businesses will paid to dial down or even have their supplies interrupted should there be the need on the grid to reduce demand. Yeah, we talked about the example in the UK earlier around consumers being incentivized to reduce their energy usage at periods where there's a risk of blackout. I mean, it's the same with demand response solutions as well. So I think what we find really interesting is the convergence of the two spaces. Residential customers are starting to now look more like how C&I customers have previously. And so our acquisition of the Beige technology teams brings real deep expertise, especially in the C&I space with some of the products that they have there that we can start to look to develop to be able to support residential customers as well as C&I customers too.
And one of the last topics I thought we'd touch on is your probably biggest competitor, which is another K name, Kraken. Another sort of innovator out of the UK. And, you know, I guess there's so much room on this market for all sorts of innovation and all sorts of products. And obviously they've entered into an agreement with Origin, which is a competitor to AGL. But what sort of different things does Kaluza bring, say, compared to a Kraken, or, you know, is there something that you think differentiates Kaluza a bit?
So I think from all of our competitors, one of the differences with Kaluza is that we are energy specific. I think there's many other solutions out there that have been used to bill energy or water or telecoms, for example.
Yeah,
we see the complexity and the opportunity within energy. We think that, especially when we think through the transition, we think that energy warrants its own solutions. To be able to really unlock the value across the whole energy system. And so that's one of the differences with Kaluza. We see significant opportunity within the energy, because I think we've touched on the just the breadth of the opportunity, and also how applicable our solutions are globally. And so we really see the value is in investing deeply in the energy space, because there's definitely a need to, and that's been proven with our conversations globally.
Absolutely. And I think in particular in Australia, I really look forward to the innovations that you bring on vehicle to grid and just smart EV charging in general. I was recently in London. I was lucky enough to have a holiday there, and it's so noticeable how much more advanced it is with electric vehicles. It's just charging everywhere, and there's EVs everywhere, and it was really exciting to see, because I feel like, I thought, this is what it's going to look like, and I know it's coming. So I really look forward to that part of Kaluza's input into Australian market, and to keeping in touch with you and hearing about some of the new things that you guys learn in all of your different markets.
It's great. Well, thank you for today, Sophie. It's been great to chat, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
It's been fantastic, and thank you for putting aside a very early morning start for us over here. And yes, let's speak again soon. Bye for now.
And that was Melissa Gander, the CEO of Kaluza, talking to Sophie just before Christmas. Rachel, I'm not too sure the big things that you took out of that. What I took out of it was that the Australian energy retail business needs to change quickly, and the UK could be one good way to follow, because no one trusts their retailer anymore, and the bills are still too bloody high.
I think that's a pretty self-explanatory thing to say, really, given what we've seen over the last 18 months, 4 years, with people's attitudes towards virtual power plants. And particularly in the last year or so with, that requirement of batteries. No one trusts their retailer. No one trusts their retailer to do the right thing by them. So
Well, I've got
innovation needs to happen very, very quickly.
Well, it does need to happen, and we're one of those many people. Come onto some of the stats that have been just released. There's been a lot of batteries, 200,000 actually. Let's do it now. 200,000 home batteries have been installed since the rebate was introduced in the 1st of July. That's delivered 4.3 gigawatt hours of home battery storage, which I think we started to see is having an impact on the grid, particularly in those evening peaks, and is helping the market operator navigate its way through those heat waves. So that's interesting and beneficial. The forecast now are that we could have more than 11,000 gigawatt hours by the
I
end
think
of
it
the
was
first
11 and a half.
11.5, according to Tristan
Yeah.
Leaders from Green Energy.
Yeah.
That's right. Thanks for the correction. That's huge. And that's going to have an even bigger benefit to the grid. But the problem is that a lot of these people who put in batteries, and there's going to be probably 500,000 of them by the end of this financial year, are sitting there looking at their network costs now where you are in Victoria. I think they're not as bad as they are here in northern New South Wales. But I'm just looking at our bill. We've got our battery put in just about a month ago, and it seems it's going to be very hard to dodge the network charges, which amount to $1,000 a year, which begs a big question.
What?
$1,000 a year, $2.65 a day. So it's not far short of $1,000 a year. It begs a question.
Every time I hear you talk about your power bills, Charles, I am thankful I don't live in New South Wales. Good grief.
Yeah.
I think ours is still about $1 a day.
You've got a different regulator down there.
Hmm.
I think they keep an eye on things better than the national regulator. It's shocking. It begs the question, though, if the network charge costs $1,000 a day just to stay connected to the grid, but I don't need the grid that much apart from exporting solar, for which I get not much. In fact, tuppence, I think, is exactly. I think tuppence translates about 5 cents now.
You're still getting 5 cents.
So we're still getting 5 cents. Lucky me. But it begs the question, because we always thought of the grid as the cheapest battery as backup for the house. But if I'm paying $1,000 a year for that, is that still the case? And if that's not the case, then what choices do people make on an economic basis? And what does this mean for the future of the grid and the retail industry and the networks?
Especially if people are getting massive 20 or 40 kilowatt hour batteries right now.
Well, they're getting 40 kilowatt hours and 50 kilowatt hour batteries, which is huge. I mean, and that's enough to really take a house off the grid unless they've got like 6 EVs and like to have all their lights on and got 15 kids or something like that. I mean, some people are big electricity users, 2 swimming pools, yes, or a heated swimming pool, which has to be heated the whole year round. Pretty interesting. So it's going to be interesting to see the way that the Australian retail market does actually evolve. One of the big challenges here is that most of the big retailers are married to the owners of the coal generators. In fact, they're one of the same group. And we've seen this week that Origin is in no hurry to close its Eraring coal-fired power station. It's going to keep it open for another 2 years because it's going to make money.
Yep.
Doesn't need an underwriting agreement from the New South Wales government. It's got enough money, and it announced the so-called early closure of Eraring in 2022 and built how many wind and solar farms since then?
Zero.
There you go.
And that, I mean, that's kind of matched by AGL. We're having a chat today. I'm working on the story now. They're considering reviving a gas peaking proposal for New South Wales. They are co-developing the Pottinger solar wind project in New South Wales, and that's it. And they have one other large-scale renewables project in Australia.
Yeah.
So
it's all a bit slow. Yeah. I mean, look, point out with AGL that they did sign offtake agreements with 2 wind farms, Waddy and WA and Palmer, which kind of helped break that investment drought. A year-long investment drought in wind, caused partially because no one like AGL or Origin wrote any contracts. So they've broken their own drought. So good for them. But look, I actually just think that the more rooftop solar and the more battery storage that households can install, that's really the big hope for the energy transition and the pace of the energy transition. And according to the latest data from Tristanitas at Green Energy Markets, we had a record install of rooftop solar in December, 300 and, can you remember the last figure? 315 megawatts of. Anyway, it was a record, the most ever, which is fantastic because everyone thought that maybe the rooftop solar installation industry has sort of died in the ass because everyone was focused on battery storage. But it seems that people are upgrading their solar systems as we have, and other people who have not previously had solar are now adding solar along with their big batteries, which makes sense, of course.
Well, I think people thought it had died in the month after the rebate came in, because that was when everyone went to batteries. And then, what was it? Oh, it was around about September, I think, everything started coming back. It was late mid-August, I think, September, and everything started coming back. And those views about the death of rooftop solar were proved well wrong.
Well, maybe the installers figured out that they could actually do both at the same time, and a bit of organisation.
They could rub their stomach and pat their head at the same time.
Oh, yeah, it's actually harder to do than you think, especially when you get older. Anyway, look, some other good news. Solar recycling. We've on this podcast, Sophie and you guys have talked about the issue about recycling of solar panels. It's just phenomenal, the amount of solar panels which are taken off rooftops each year. 4 million I've heard. I still can't quite get my mind around that number, and I still question that number. But anyway, that's what we're told, 4 million. At the moment, they're not going to do many places very useful, and the solar recycling industry is struggling. But now there's a bit of a plan to solve that issue with a national collection system. So 100 sites around Australia to sort of break that. So what was, the nexus between, the cost of installers taking panels off the roof and taking them to somewhere where they can be recycled. Now they've just got to take it to a collection point. If there's going to be 100 of them around the country, then presumably they're going to be convenient for most
somewhere
installers.
Yeah. There's one of the biggest complaints by the recyclers was that it just costs so much more than the panel to either recycle it or to take it off the roof, to transport it to somewhere it needs to be. So they said no one was doing it because it costs too much money, except for in Victoria, once again, where there are mandates to deal with things. You're not allowed to put it in landfill. So what option have you got? You've got to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's helped with collection here, but around the rest of the country, they're a bit stuck.
I didn't realise that Victoria led so well in these issues. Look, it's important for the renewables industry and the solar industry in particular to get on top of this, because there'll be nothing worse or nothing more easy for the critics just to sort of look at sort of piles of panels in landfills and things like that and say, look, this is not good, this is not clean, this is not renewable. So that's really important.
Also, the sheer amount of stuff that can come out of a solar panel, which can be reused. I know it's not simple to recycle these things. It's not simple to recycle anything. But if you are just in the business of recycling a solar panel, you're not in the business of recycling a whole different, collection of plastic bags, all made of slightly different materials. It's just a solar panel. It's got pretty much the same stuff in it. You think it should be something that can be done in an efficient way. And I think there's a couple of companies out there that say they can do it.
They can do it, yes.
But
it's just getting over that sort of the so-called valley of death, or the sort of the early adopter type thing, and the costs. And once you get them settled in, I mean, there was a time when used panels were sort of sent off to Africa or other places now, but the cost of solar is so cheap now that they can't even compete. Just the transport costs of taking old solar.
They buy new from China.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not mucking around with second hand. They buy new from China because it's so cheap.
Yeah.
But then maybe China's VAT rebate changes may have some impact on that.
What do you know about this? Because you guys have discussed this beforehand, and we're starting to see a little bit of inkling, not necessarily in Australia, but possibly Australia, but also around the world, that PV prices, which have kind of fallen reasonably well from the original, the big price jumps after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But there's something happening in the market now which is stopping them from falling further.
So basically what's happened is China has said, we're not rebating your 9% VAT anymore. You're not getting that back. You've got to pay it. That comes in April this year. And so there's a lot of people around the world saying, oh, your solar panel prices are going to go up by 9 cents. 9 cents? It's 9 cents. And 9%, sorry, 9%. And but the people I was talking to last year, the solar panel manufacturers were saying it's probably going to add about a cent per kilowatt, I believe it was. So it may not make a huge difference in the near future, just given how much supply there is still coming out of China, which is one of the reasons why China has done this, to pull back some of the oversupply that it's creating. But whether prices will jump by as much as 9%, that's going to remain to be seen. No one's really saying anything about that yet.
Well, historically, the industry has had enormous capacity to absorb such price increases, and there's always going to be competition. But there'll probably also be a whole bunch of advertising from people saying, watch, our prices might go up, so get in now and get in early.
That is exactly what is happening.
There you go. Who knew? Maybe we should be in the solar industry. Again.
And interestingly, many of them aimed not so much at consumers, the consumer level, but at the commercial and large scale levels, from what I've seen by people spruiking their businesses on the LinkedIn.
No, that's very true. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, Rachel, look, I'm not too sure we've got much else to talk about in this first episode of the year. But look, a good start with Melissa Gander from Kaluza. So thanks for joining us. And listeners will be back with the normal panel next time, I think. Sophie will return from holidays in time for the next episode. And I'll be focusing just on Energy Insiders, and also do check out the Driven podcast with Sam. Also coming up with its first episodes of the year. And the Switched On podcast has also resumed, and Delaney hosting that, focusing on electrification as well. And her first podcast of the year is a really good interview with Ron Ben-David, the former regulator in Victoria, who has some really interesting things to say about retailers and the way they treat customers, and the fact that they don't treat them very well, and the fact that they should actually be forced to. It's really funny, because if you actually listen now to all the big utilities when they come up with their profit results, it's kind of like they sort of realized a couple of years ago, oh shit, the customers, and they go, oh, we're really, really focused on the customers all the time. But you look at the bills and you look at the way they're treated, and you go, well, no, they think of them as in numbers and things like that. And Ron Ben-David argues that they should be forced to treat them well, rather than just encouraged to treat them well. And that's got a lot to do. Look, this is an essential service. It's key to our climate reduction efforts. It's key to the economy. So give that a listen. Anyway, in the meantime, thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you, Giles.
Thanks to Sophie and to Melissa Gander for joining us. Thanks, of course, to our sponsors, Pylon, who have been here right from the start, and also Fronius, who are sponsoring a series of episodes with this podcast. And Solar Insiders will return with its normal cast in a fortnight's time. Thanks for listening or watching. Bye for now.